The drone was falling. 8 tons of classified technology, fully fueled, completely dead, screaming toward a town of 12,000 people at 300 miles per hour. The control room had gone silent. The engineers had given up. The pilots had nothing left to try. And in the corner of an officers' club, surrounded by men who had mocked her just minutes before, a woman in a stained flight suit cracked her knuckles and whispered for words that would change everything. I built this thing. This is the story of the night Chief Warrant Officer Evelyn Ross became a legend. The night arrogance met excellence. The night a maintenance tech rewrote the rules of aerial combat. And the night an entire military base learned what real authority looks like. This is the story of Ross Point. The Arizona desert doesn't apologize for its heat, even after sunset. On the evening of June 17, 2023, the thermometer outside the officers' club at Gila Bend Air Force Station still read 94 degrees at 7:30 p.m. but inside, the air conditioning worked overtime, keeping the celebration cool and the champagne colder. It was commissioning night. 15 newly minted second lieutenants had just received their bars in a ceremony that morning. Now they filled the club with the kind of energy that only comes from young officers who've never been tested, never been humbled, never been to war. The music was too loud, the laughter was too confident, and the echoes, they filled every corner of that room. At the center of it all stood Second Lieutenant Brandon Keene, 23 years old, top third of his class at the academy, degree in aerospace engineering, a jawline that looked like it had been designed by a recruiting poster artist. He moved through the crowd like a politician, shaking hands, telling stories, making sure everyone knew exactly where he'd graduated and exactly what he planned to accomplish. His uniform was perfect, not a thread out of place, not a crease unintended. He wore his rank like armor, and he made sure you saw it. "Give me 6 months," he was saying to a cluster of fellow lieutenants, his voice carrying across the room, "and I'll be running readiness assessments for the whole wing. These systems aren't that complicated once you understand the architecture." The others nodded, impressed or intimidated, or both. Keene had that effect on people, but not on everyone. Near the back wall, almost invisible in the chaos, stood a woman in a faded green flight suit, the kind that had seen 1,000 missions and twice as many oil changes. Her name tag was worn nearly smooth, the letters barely readable in the dim light. She held a glass of water, not wine, not beer, just water. Her hair was short and practical, streaked with grey. Her face was weathered in a way that suggested years spent outdoors, in hangars, on tarmacs, under aircraft. She couldn't have been more than 5'6". But there was something about her posture, something about the way she stood that made her seem immovable. She wasn't socializing, wasn't mingling, wasn't celebrating. She was just there, watching, listening, remembering. Keene noticed her during a lull in conversation. His eyes landed on her worn flight suit, her scuffed boots, her quiet isolation. Something in his brain made a snap judgment. The kind young men with new authority make when they think they've figured out the world. He nudged the lieutenant next to him and tilted his head toward her. "Check it out," he said, loud enough to be heard. Didn't know they invited maintenance staff to officer functions. A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the group. Keene, emboldened by the reaction, raised his voice. "Hey there," he called across the room. "You here to fix something?" Coffee machine acting up again. More forced laughter. The woman didn't react, didn't turn her head, didn't acknowledge the comment at all. She just took another slow sip of water, her eyes fixed somewhere far beyond the walls of that club. Keene smirked and turned back to his group, already moving on to the next joke, the next story, the next moment of validation. But on the upper-level balcony, someone had been watching the entire exchange. Colonel Marcus Thorne, 48 years old, 26 years in service, 3 combat tours, 2 stars away from being a general, and 1 decision away from either recommending Keene for fast-track advancement or burying his career before it started. Thorne's eyes narrowed. He recognized that stance. The weight distribution, the controlled stillness, the way her shoulders sat level even while holding a drink. He'd seen that posture before in combat zones, in cockpits, in moments right before. Everything either went perfectly right or catastrophically wrong. That wasn't the posture of someone who worked on coffee machines. That was the posture of someone who had flown through hell and walked out the other side. Thorne made a mental note. Then he went back to watching the party, wondering how long it would take for the truth to surface. He didn't have to wait long. At exactly 8:02 p.m., the music died. Not gradually. Not because someone turned it down. It died because the base-wide emergency system overrode every speaker, every screen, every device in the building. The siren wasn't the one they used for drills. This one was lower, darker, more urgent. It was the sound that meant something expensive was breaking, something dangerous was failing, and someone's career was about to end, or worse. Red strobes pulsed through the room. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Classes froze mid-sip. Every phone in the building lit up simultaneously. Then the voice came through the intercom. Flat, professional, barely controlled panic underneath. Attention all personnel. We have an in-flight emergency. X7 Spectre, tail number 4 for 7 Delta, has experienced complete systems failure. Aircraft is non-responsive. Propulsion still active. Full fuel load. Trajectory unstable. A chill went through the room. The X7 Spectre wasn't just another drone. It was a $40 million experimental reconnaissance platform. Classified, cutting-edge, packed with technology that didn't officially exist and sensors that could read a license plate from 60,000 feet, and it was falling. Current trajectory projects impact near Haven Rock Township. The voice continued. Population 12,000. Impact estimated in 11 minutes. The room erupted. Officers scrambled for their phones. Someone ran for the door. Lieutenant Keen's voice rose above the chaos, barking questions at no one in particular. Who's got command? What's the status? Get me a sitrep now. He was trying to sound authoritative, trying to take charge, but his voice cracked slightly on the last word. The truth was obvious to everyone in that room. He had no idea what to do. Nobody did. A wall-mounted monitor flickered and switched from a slideshow of commissioning photos to a live telemetry feed. The X7's flight path appeared in red, a downward arc that told a simple, terrible story. It was going to hit, and there was nothing anyone could do about it, except, in the back corner of the room, the woman in the one flight suit set down her glass of water. She didn't run, didn't shout, didn't join the chaos. She simply walked with calm, measured steps toward a narrow alcove on the side of the room where an auxiliary communications console sat mostly unused, typically reserved for coordinating VIP transport or checking weather patterns. She sat down, and she started typing. Lieutenant Keen saw her move and something in his brain short-circuited. Hey, he shouted, pushing through the crowd. What do you think you're doing? That's restricted equipment. You can't just... She didn't look up. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with frightening speed and precision. Not hunting and pecking, not searching through menus, diving. The screen in front of her lit up with cascading windows, system diagnostics, subsystem maps, lines of raw code that looked like a foreign language. She wasn't accessing the X7 through normal channels. She was going underneath them, through maintenance backdoors and emergency protocols that didn't appear in any standard manual. Kin reached her. His face flushed. I said stop. You're not authorized to. She's more authorized than you are. Lieutenant. A voice cut through from the balcony. Colonel Thorne. He hadn't moved from his position, but his voice carried absolute authority. Everyone shut up and let her work. The room fell silent except for the clicking of keys and the steady pulse of the alarm. On the main screen, the red arc continued its terrible descent. 10 minutes to impact. 9. 8. Someone whispered. It's not responding. The drone's completely dead. Even if she could access it, there's nothing to access. But her fingers never stopped moving. Then, so subtle most people missed it, the arc changed. Just 1 degree, maybe less, but it changed. Wait, someone said. Did you see that? The trajectory shifted. Another officer confirmed, leaning toward the screen. It's turning. All eyes moved from the main display to the woman in the corner. She still hadn't said a word. On her screen, a subsystem labeled fuel transfer lit up green. Then another. Attitude thrusters, then another. Emergency ballast protocol. She wasn't flying the drone. You can't fly a dead aircraft. But she was doing something else entirely. She was redistributing its weight, shifting fuel between wing tanks, using tiny compressed nitrogen thrusters meant for high-altitude adjustment to create microseconds of directional force. She was using physics, mathematics, and intimate knowledge of every system on that aircraft to turn 8 tons of falling metal into a glider. An unsteady, struggling, barely controlled glider. But a glider nonetheless. That's impossible, someone whispered. You can't control a drone without flight systems. She's not controlling it, Thorne said quietly. She's persuading it. The arc continued to bend. 7 minutes. 6. 5. The impact zone shifted on the map, away from Haven Rock, away from homes and schools and shopping centers, toward empty marshland on the edge of the base perimeter. Who is she? Keen asked, his voice barely a whisper now. Thorne didn't answer. He just watched as the woman in the corner performed a miracle. 4 minutes. The drone was still falling. But now it was falling where she wanted it to fall. 3 minutes. Someone in the room started praying. 2 minutes. The woman's hands finally slowed. She'd done everything she could. The rest was physics, luck, and the will of whatever God watched over fools and falling aircraft. 1 minute. The room held its breath. And then, on the screen, the red line touched down. Not in Haven Rock. Not in anyone's backyard or school or hospital. In the marsh. Creed Section E7. Empty land. Wetlands that had never seen anything more dramatic than migrating birds. The impact registered on seismic sensors. A heavy thud that rattled windows 3 miles away. But no explosion. No fire. No casualties. The drone was down, intact, recoverable. And 12,000 people who would never know how close they'd come went on with their evening, completely unaware that their lives had just been saved by a woman in a worn flight suit who nobody had bothered to ask about. The silence in the officers' club was absolute. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Then the whole room erupted. But the woman didn't turn around, didn't smile, didn't acknowledge the applause. She just stood up, logged out of the console, and walked back to where she'd been standing before, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just rewritten the laws of aviation. Colonel Thorne's voice cut through the celebration. Pull up her file. The room went quiet again. Sir? An aide asked. The woman at that console. Pull up her complete personnel file. All of it. Unredacted. The aide hesitated for just a moment, then moved to a terminal. The main screen flickered, and then her name appeared. The room shifted. You could feel it, like the air pressure had changed. CW5, the highest technical rank in the United States military. Rarer than a general. More specialized than any pilot. The kind of rank most officers served entire careers without ever meeting. The file continued to load. More than most commercial pilots accumulated in a lifetime. More than some entire squadrons combined. Deployments: Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Kosovo. Locations that were still classified, marked only with asterisks and security codes. The list scrawled. Helicopters, fixed wing, drones, experimental platforms that didn't have public names, clearances, above top secret, special access programs, compartmented information that required 3 different background checks just to know existed. Then the decorations. For heroism in aerial combat. For gallantry in action against an enemy of the United States. For exceptionally meritorious conduct in the performance of outstanding services. The ribbons kept coming. Purple Heart. A medal with combat device. And more, so many more. But it was the last line that made the room go completely silent. She hadn't just saved the drone. She had built it. Every line of code. Every system. Every backup protocol and emergency procedure. The access code she'd used wasn't a workaround or a hack. It was something she'd written into the architecture herself. A final failsafe. A line of defense so deep in the system that it didn't appear in operator manuals or technical documentation. She had spoken to the X-7 in its native language. Not as a pilot. Not as a technician. As its creator. Lieutenant Keane stood frozen, his face pale. The confident smirk from an hour ago had vanished completely. Around him, other officers stared at the screen with expressions ranging from awe to shame to disbelief. This was the woman they'd ignored. The woman Keane had mocked. The woman whose expertise exceeded everyone in that room combined. Colonel Thorne stepped forward. Slowly, deliberately. He stopped exactly 3 feet from Chief Warrant Officer Ross. Then he saluted. Not a casual salute. Not a routine gesture of respect. This was different. Slow, precise, formal. The kind of salute reserved for Medal of Honor recipients, for flag-draped coffins, for moments when words fail and only tradition can carry the weight of what needs to be said. Ross returned it with a slight nod. Thorne held the salute for a 3 count, then dropped his hand. He turned to face the room. Let me be very clear about what just happened here, he said, his voice carrying to every corner. 12,000 people are alive right now, because of Chief Warrant Officer Ross. $40 million of equipment was saved because of her, and this base's reputation remains intact because of her. He paused, letting that sink in. You saw bars on a collar and assumed authority. You saw silence and assumed ignorance. You saw one equipment and assumed lesser value. His eyes found Keane. You were wrong. The words hung in the air like an indictment. Rank is nothing without competence. Authority is nothing without expertise. And respect is earned through action, not demanded through position. He walked slowly toward Keane, who looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. Lieutenant Keane, Thorne said quietly, but everyone heard him. You have a choice to make tonight. You can let this moment define you as the officer who learned humility, or you can let it define you as the officer who couldn't. Keen's throat worked. Sir, you'll have your chance to speak. Thorne cut him off. But not now. Now, you're going to think very carefully about what kind of leader you want to be. He turned back to the room. This applies to all of you. Every single one of you new officers. You have education. You have training. You have potential. But you don't have wisdom. You don't have experience. And you sure as hell don't have the right to disrespect the people who've been doing this job since before you could spell military. The room remained silent. Dismissed, Thorne said. Except you, Lieutenant Keen. You stay. The crowd dispersed quietly, each officer lost in their own thoughts about what they witnessed. Ross moved toward the door. Chief Ross, Thorne called. She stopped. Thank you. She gave a small nod. Just did my job, sir. No, Thorne said. You did everyone's job, including mine. The faintest smile crossed her face. Then she was gone, disappearing into the night like she'd never been there at all. Only Keen remained, standing at attention, waiting for whatever judgment was coming. Colonel Thorne didn't yell. He didn't lecture. He simply handed Lieutenant Keen a blank legal pad and a pen. 1,000 words, Thorne said. Handwritten. An apology to Chief Warrant Officer Ross and to every warrant officer and senior NCO on this base. Keen's eyes widened. Sir, 1,000 words, Thorne repeated. Due by 0600 tomorrow. And then you're going to read it aloud at the next base formation. Sir, in front of everyone. Keen's face flushed. With respect, sir, that's humiliating. Thorne finished. Yes, it is. You humiliated Chief Ross in front of a room full of people. Now you will humble yourself in front of the entire base. Consider it a lesson in consequences. Sir, do you understand the order, Lieutenant? Keen swallowed hard. Yes, sir. Then get out of my sight. Keen left, the legal pad clutched in his hand like a sentence of execution. 2 days later, at 0700, the entire base stood in formation on the main tarmac. The sun hadn't fully cleared the horizon yet. The desert air still held the night's coolness. Rows upon rows of uniforms stood at attention, from airmen to colonels, from maintenance crews to pilots. Nobody knew exactly why they'd been called to formation, but rumors had spread fast. Lieutenant Keen stood at the podium, the legal pad trembling slightly in his hands. Colonel Thorne stood to the side, arms crossed, watching. Keen cleared his throat. My name is Second Lieutenant Brandon Keen, he began, his voice tight but clear, and I owe you all an apology. The base remained silent. 2 nights ago, I committed an act of profound disrespect. I made assumptions about a fellow service member based on appearance, based on rank structure I didn't fully understand, and based on arrogance I mistook for confidence. His voice cracked slightly, but he pushed through. I mocked Chief Warrant Officer 5 Evelyn Ross in front of other officers. I questioned her presence at an officer function. I treated her like she was less than me, like she didn't belong, like her contributions to this military and this base didn't matter. He paused, took a breath. I was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong. Chief Ross has served this country for 24 years. She has more flight hours than most pilots will ever log. She's been decorated for valor in combat. She's designed weapon systems that keep us all safer. And 2 nights ago, she saved 12,000 civilian lives and $40 million in military hardware using expertise I couldn't begin to understand. And I treated her like she was there to fix a coffee machine. Someone in the formation shifted uncomfortably. Otherwise, silence. I don't deserve forgiveness for that, Keen continued. But I'm asking for the opportunity to learn from it. To do better. To be better. To every warrant officer on this base. To every senior NCO. To every person I've overlooked or underestimated because they didn't wear the rank I thought deserved respect. I'm sorry. Your expertise matters. Your experience matters. You matter. I'm a new officer. I have a degree and some training and a lot of potential. But I don't have wisdom. I don't have experience. And I sure as hell don't have the right to disrespect people who've been serving since before I graduated high school. He looked down at his notes, then back up at the formation. Chief Ross demonstrated something that night that I hope to embody someday. Real leadership. Quiet. Competent. Focused. On the mission instead of recognition. She didn't need anyone's permission to be excellent. She just was. That's the kind of officer I want to become. Not the kind who demands respect because of rank, but the kind who earns it through action. He folded the paper. Thank you for listening. And thank you for your service. He stepped back from the podium. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, from somewhere in the formation, Someone started a slow clap. It spread. Not enthusiastic, not celebratory, respectful, acknowledging that what had just happened took courage, took humility, took the kind of strength that's harder to find than physical bravery. Colonel Thorne stepped to the podium. Lieutenant Keane made a mistake, he said. A serious one. But he owned it. He's taking steps to learn from it. And I expect every officer on this base to do the same. We're all learning, every day. The moment you think you know everything is the moment you become dangerous. To your people and your mission, learn from this. All of you, dismissed. The formation broke. Keane stood alone for a moment, then felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned. It was Chief Ross. That took guts, Lieutenant, she said quietly. It was the least I could do. Keane replied, his voice hoarse. You're going to be fine, Ross said. Just remember, leadership isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being smart enough to listen to the people who are. She gave his shoulder a brief squeeze, then walked away. Keane watched her go, feeling like he'd just been given something far more valuable than forgiveness. He'd been given a second chance. The change didn't happen overnight, but it happened. That afternoon, Lieutenant Keane showed up at the motor pool, not to give orders, not to inspect. He showed up with a notebook and questions. Master Sergeant Hollis, he said to the head mechanic, I read in the manual that these diesel engines have a particulate filter regeneration cycle, but I don't actually understand how it works. Could you walk me through it? Hollis looked up, surprised. Then he smiled. Sure thing, Lieutenant. Let me show you. 2 days later, Keane was in the communications shop, sitting across from CW3 Martinez. I need to understand uplink redundancy, Keane said. Not from a textbook, from someone who actually keeps these systems running. Martinez raised an eyebrow. You got a couple hours. I've got all day. Word spread. Other lieutenants noticed. Some mocked him at first, called him teacher's pet and colonel's project. But then they saw the results. They saw how the senior enlisted actually responded to him now. How they offered information instead of minimum compliance. How they included him in conversations instead of working around him. And slowly, other officers started following his example. Lieutenant Chern spent a week shadowing the avionics team. Lieutenant Park asked a gunnery sergeant to review her maintenance protocols. Lieutenant Williams started eating lunch in the NCO break room instead of the officers' dining facility. The invisible wall between new officers and experienced enlisted personnel began to crack. Not everywhere, not completely, but enough that people noticed. Enough that it mattered. One evening, about 3 weeks after the incident, someone left a handwritten note on Chief Ross's workstation. It was unsigned, but the message was clear. Thank you for showing us what right looks like. Ross read it, smiled slightly, then tucked it into her pocket and went back to work. 6 weeks after the incident, a team from the Pentagon arrived at Gila Bend. They spent 3 days analyzing the code Chief Ross had written during those critical minutes. They interviewed her. They reconstructed the event. They ran simulations. When they finished, they drafted a report that was immediately classified. But one piece of it wasn't. The sequence she'd used to save the X-7 was officially designated a standard emergency protocol across all advanced UAV platforms. In the United States military, they called it the Ross Maneuver. It wasn't announced with fanfare. There was no ceremony, no press release. It simply appeared in technical documentation and training materials as Emergency Protocol RM001. Only people who needed to know understood what the IM stood for. But they knew, and they taught it to every new pilot, every new operator, every new engineer who came through the program. The crash site in the marsh was officially designated Greedy 7. But nobody called it that. Pilots flying overhead started calling it Ross Point. A tradition developed, subtle, unofficial. When pilots passed over that section of marsh, they dipped their wings, just slightly, just enough. A salute to the woman who'd brought one home when everyone else had given up. As for Ross herself, she didn't change. The morning after the Pentagon team left, she was back in the hangar at 0715, coveralls stained with hydraulic fluid, explaining to a young airman, why you always check the torque on control. Surface mounting bolts twice. When someone called her a hero, she just shrugged. Did what needed doing, she said. System worked the way it was supposed to. You designed the system, the airman pointed out. Then I guess I did my job right. The story spread beyond Gila Bend, not through official channels, through the network of warrant officers and senior NCOs that exists in every branch of service. The people who actually keep the military running while officers come and go. It became part of the culture, part of the instruction. A story told to new lieutenants and young captains who thought their degree and their rank meant they knew everything. The story of the night a maintenance tech saved a town. The night arrogance met excellence. The night the quietest person in the room turned out to be the most important. Chief Warrant Officer 5 Evelyn Ross retired 3 years later. 27 years of service. More decorations than she could wear on a dress uniform. More contributions to military aviation than most people would make in 5 lifetimes. She didn't want a retirement ceremony. They gave her one anyway. Small. Private. Just the people who mattered. Colonel Thorne was there, now wearing a general's stars. Lieutenant Keane was there, now Captain Keane, with a reputation as one of the best young officers in his squadron, and hundreds of others. Warrant officers, NCOS pilots, engineers, people whose lives she'd touched, whose careers she'd shaped, whose respect she'd earned through decades of quiet excellence. When it came time for speeches, Ross stood at the podium and said exactly 7 words. "It's been an honor. Thank you all." Then she sat down. The crowd erupted in applause that lasted 5 full minutes. When it finally died down, someone started singing. Not the national anthem, not a military hymn, just a simple song that mechanics and crew, chiefs sing in hangars late at night when the work is hard and the hours are long. Others joined in, and for a moment, in that small ceremony, you could feel it. The weight of service, the value of expertise, the power of humility. Everything that Chief Warrant Officer 5, Evelyn Ross, had embodied for 27 years. As she walked out of that building for the last time in uniform, she passed a wall where someone had mounted a simple plaque. It read, Ross Point, June 17, 2023. Excellence needs no announcement. It speaks for itself. She stopped, looked at it for a long moment, then smiled, and walked into the desert sunset, ready for whatever came next. The story of Chief Warrant Officer Evelyn Ross reminds us of something we too often forget, that real expertise doesn't always come with the loudest voice or the highest rank. Sometimes it comes quietly, in worn uniforms and calloused hands, in people we overlook because they don't fit our image of what authority looks like. But those people, they're the ones who keep the world running. They're the ones who save lives when systems fail. They're the ones who've earned every ounce of respect we can give them. This is Silent Warriors, where we tell the stories of the people who serve without seeking glory, who led without demanding recognition, who make the difference when it matters most. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about the quiet professionals who keep us safe, hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Silent Warriors, so you never miss another story of the heroes who serve in silence. Because these stories matter, these people matter, and they deserve to be remembered. Until next time, this is Silent Warriors. Stay humble, stay grateful, and never underestimate the person in the worn uniform.